At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Experience a progressive lens engineered with AI from Essilor, powered by individual measurements of your visual behavior. A lens personalized to you by an Essilor expert. Discover Verilux XR Track and enjoy instantly sharp vision in motion and seamless transitions from near to far. Find your local Essilor expert today at Essilor.com.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner, by knockout, is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
You're listening to the Animation Addicts Podcast with the Rotoscopers, episode 185, Charlotte's Web. So many tears for a spider. Welcome to the Animation Addicts Podcast with the Rotoscopers, the number one place to get your animation fix with animation addicts just like you. Each episode, we dive into the wonderful world of animation featuring Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, and everything in between. From hilarious discussions and movie reviews to interviews with industry insiders, this show's mission is to brighten your day through our love of animation. So hop on your nerdy couch, grab some snacks, and get ready to hang out with your animation besties because it's time to dive into today's episode.
Hello. We're your hosts. I'm Morgan Stradling.
And I'm Chelsea Robson.
And we are excited to be back for another episode of the Animation Addicts Podcast. This time, we are reviewing an old 70s classic. And boy, does this have a 70s vibe to it.
Oh, yeah.
Charlotte's Web from 1973. But before we do that, Chelsea, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Morgan. How are you?
Pretty great. It's Friday when we're recording this. So
we are.
Everybody loves Friday. If you don't love Friday, I don't know what's wrong with you. Fridays are great. Almost the beginning of the weekend. And I go on a beach trip tomorrow. So
really? Where are you going?
Better. We're going to San Diego.
Oh, nice.
So yeah. My mom, we do this every 2 years. We do a family beach trip. And my mom, she reserves it a year in advance because that's just how she is.
Right.
And unfortunately, a month before, so she booked it, everything was good. Like then she can relax. She's just always so nervous that it's going to fill up, right?
Right.
Like I think as soon as you can do it is basically a year in advance, you can start booking on Airbnb type websites. And yeah, a month ago, we got an email that our reservation had been canceled because the homeowner or property owner decided that they were pulling out their contract with the vacation rental company that we did. And so that's really frustrating and stressful. Yeah. But luckily, we were able to find another place. I'm hoping that it's good. Our other one was just amazing. It was literally like 50 steps from the beach. It was nice. Just so perfect, but that's okay. It'll still be great. We're going to the beach and I can't wait.
I need a beach trip. That's what I need.
I mean, we live in Arizona. It's so easy to find a beach, just a few hours away.
It's true.
My sister, I swear, she's gone to the beach like 3 or 4 times this summer. Socially distancing, of course. But
you are smart like that.
Yeah, she's a teacher, so why hang out here when it's 110 degrees? Why don't if her friends go on trips with their family, she just tags along. So
especially if she's only like teaching maybe 1 hour a day now,
right?
Via Skype, like if that were my gig of like, sweet, heading to Mexico,
right.
Well, When we say going to Mexico, like Rocky Point is the closest beach probably
about 4
to
hours
us.
away from
Yeah. So that's what we mean and by that. It's like, sweet, another beach. So
Yep.
not going to Mexico City. So
All right, before we get started, I wanted to give a shout out to our newest patrons. We have Matthew, Chad, Jessica, and Esther. Woohoo! So a ton of new patrons have joined within the past month or two, and we want to give a big Roto welcome to you guys. Thank you so much for joining and for supporting the show. We have bonus episodes. For example, one that will be released by the time this comes out is our review of the Into the Unknown documentary, the 6-part documentary about the making of Frozen, the one that was supposed to be on the Blu-ray features, and everyone wondered, where was it? Why isn't there a making of? Now you know. They were holding out for Disney Plus, and wow, did they hold out, and it is fantastic. So if you want to hear our thoughts, consider becoming a patron to check out that and other goodies. Like every little bonus podcast that we do is different. Sometimes we'll do a call-in show. Sometimes we'll do trivia night with the patrons. Sometimes we'll just do a Roto rewatch where we rewatch an episode that we've already reviewed on the podcast. Sometimes it's a commentary where the three of us are just sitting and basically talking through a movie, and you watch the movie along with us. You push play at the right amount of time. So a lot of really fun stuff as part of becoming a patron. So if you're interested and you want to check out our perks, go to rotoscopers.com/patron.
sweet.
Today, the beverage aisle looks a lot different than it used to. America's beverage companies are working together. We're delivering the options everyone wants. In fact, nearly 60% of beverages Americans buy have zero sugar. You'll find more variety than ever, including more of your favorites, now available with zero sugar. You'll also find more sizes and clear calorie information on the front of every can, bottle, and pack. We know when it comes to finding balance, the more choices, the better.
The PC gave us computing power at home, the internet connected us, and mobile let us do it pretty much anywhere. Now generative AI lets us communicate with technology in our own language using our own senses. But figuring it all out when you're living through it is a totally different story. Welcome to Leading the Shift, a new podcast from Microsoft Azure. I'm your host, Susan Ettlinger. In each episode, leaders will share what they're learning to help you navigate all this change with confidence. Please join us. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Oh, we've got lots in common where it really counts, where it really counts. We've got large amounts.
Okay, so we're going we don't have a nerdy couch discussion today, but we are going to be talking about the movie Charlotte's Web. This is originally done in 1973, and it was actually so I wanted to do more of a nerdy couch spotlight, I guess. Like sometimes we'll do director's spotlights or anything. I wanted to do a small, very short, but a small spotlight on the writer of the book Charlotte's Web. What was amazing to me is this book originally came out in 1952. E.B. White is the name of the author, and his first book was Stuart Little, which that one has also stood the test of time.
Right.
And the third book he did was The Trumpet of the Swan. I'm not as familiar with that one, but I feel like I've read it.
I have not read that.
He wrote these books for children, but before he did that, he worked in a lot of print magazines and he worked in a lot of like marketing too, which I thought was very interesting because as I'm going through like this whole Charlotte, who's the spider, like she's the best marketer I have ever seen. And I just realized I'm like, oh, because E.B. White, he was a marketer and he had a way with words and he loved to be able to put his spin on children's fiction and kind of like elevate it in a way. And so in 1952 was when he let this out and he ended up getting the Newbery Medal for Charlotte's Web. And this book continues to get prestige. So in 1960, it's the American Academy of Arts and Gold and Letters Gold Medal. In 1963, Presidential Medal of Freedom. I mean,
Wow.
It just keeps going. 1970, Laura Ingalls Wilder Award. 71, National Medal of Literature. 77. I mean, it just keeps going all the way to 2012. The School Library Journal sponsored a survey of readers, which identified Charlotte's Web as the best, meaning number one, children's novel fiction title for readers 9 through 12 years old. And the librarian who conducted it said, "It is impossible to conduct a poll of this sort and expect White's novel to be anywhere but number one."
Wow, that's actually kind of interesting because that was in 2012. So we're definitely into the age of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And for this novel to still rank number one from that age category is really fantastic and shows just how timeless this novel is.
Yeah. Did you read it growing up?
I read it growing up, and as I was watching the movie to prepare for this, I'm like, dang it, I should have reread it because I love doing that. But I did not get the chance. I think I will still go and read it because it's pretty short. I think it's about 192 pages. Obviously, it's targeted as a children's novel, so it's much shorter and pretty easy to get through. And I was reading that there actually is there was a long last audiobook version where E.B. White himself is reading. Yeah. And it's supposed to be actually very emotional. They say, don't read it in your car or listen to it in your car because you will definitely have tears. Apparently it's a very just emotional reading of the book from the author, who obviously understands and has his vision of how different things were supposed to come across. So I'm going to be on the hunt for that version. Because
Please do.
Like
and
of
let me know
all the types. Let's just go to the source. I absolutely love books that are read by the author, particularly autobiographies. I feel like they have to be read by the author because it's so intrinsic to them.
Mm-hmm.
But others I'm always open to.
Yeah, it's just, you can tell there's so many things about this man that really bleed into the story. And one thing, like different people were talking about him and said that he was super shy, like super shy. Shout out to all the introverts out there. There's a quote I'm reading off of Wikipedia, his page, and it says, so in her foreword to Charlotte's Web, Kate DiCamillo writes, she quotes White as to have said, "All I hope to say in books, all that I ever hope to say is that I love the world." And like how, like he's such a tender and just very sensitive person. And White also loved animals and farms and farming and the seasons and the weather. So he was obviously very, he was much more of a nature guy than a people guy. And other people continued to say that, most of us, out of politeness, made up of faintly curiosity and profound resignation, go out to meet the smiling stranger with a gesture of surrender and a fixed grin. But White has always taken to the fire escape. He has always avoided the man in the reception room. He has always avoided the interviewer, the photographer, the microphone, the rostrum, the literary tea, and the Stork Club. His life is his own. He is the only writer of prominence I know who could walk through the Algonquin lobby or between the tables at Jack and Charlie's and only be recognized by his friends. And I was just like, it's very interesting how he was just not a man. He was definitely a shout out to the introverts out there, just wanting to be able to put out his books. And I felt like I wanted to read specifically the one where he says that all I ever hope to say is that I love the world. I feel like that is the thing that comes through the most in this story, is the love between friends, the love between characters, and how it really does propel the story. All of our information is coming from IMDb, Wikipedia, and wherever we can find basically random sources. But most of them,
if they are random sources, we will be linking them in the show notes.
Yeah, we do. For sure. So anyway, that was my small little thing about him, just how I feel like his whole spirit comes through very much through this book in lots of different characters. Like, for example, Fern. There's a quote in the movie that I'm sure was taken where they said that Fern was quiet and all the animals loved her because she was soft and she was the quiet one, and everyone came up. And I'm like, it's probably you. Like, you're probably that guy too, that all the animals just loved you because you were a comfort to go to.
Perfect.
All right. Shall we go into our main discussion?
Yeah.
Chin up, put a little laughter in your eyes, brave it, save it, even though you're feeling otherwise. Rise up, wise up, make a little smile begin. You'll be happy-hearted once you get it started up with your chinny chin chin.
All right, let's jump into our main discussion. I am really excited to talk about Charlotte's Web. Let's talk about some basic info about the film to set the stage. This, of course, comes from Box Office Mojo, IMDb, Wikipedia, and all other great sources, which we will link in the show notes. So the studio is Hanna-Barbera Productions, and there was another studio that was involved. They were the ones that initially had the rights. It was called Sagittarius Productions. So at the very beginning, when I was first watching this, it said a Hanna-Barbera Sagittarius Productions feature. And I'm like, oh, wow. Where did the Sagittarius came in? But it was because it was the two. It wasn't that they bought this new studio. It was instead that the two studios were working together as part of it. Sagittarius Productions, after quite a pretty rough switching hands, as is very common with movie scripts and especially gaining rights to literary pieces. It just doesn't end up working out with one studio. It moves to another studio. The rights eventually expire and move to another studio, and eventually landed in the hands of Hanna-Barbera, which we are very familiar with, especially during this time. They were a household name by the 70s. So the directors was Charles Nichols and Iwao Takamoto. He was a very famous director and producer for Hanna-Barbera. He really only has 2 director credits to his name. He was a supervising director for Jetsons, a movie, and Charlotte's Web was his main director's credit. But he was a producer basically from 1973 onward through the 90s. Eventually, he died in 2007, but worked through the 90s for a variety of the Hanna-Barbera productions. So had a really fantastic career. And so the release date of this film was March 1st, 1973. It was initially supposed to come out in 1972, but they pushed it to March so that way it wouldn't face direct competition with Disney's Robin Hood, which was going to come out in November, was when it was initially supposed to come out. Now, the box office, I'm getting different reports all over the place. One says $5.2 million. I saw another one that said $2.4 million, and then it says, quote, rentals. I'm like, that's not your box office. So obviously this was not necessarily the early days of cinema and animation, but it was not as much of a machine as it is now, where we know everything. Like literally to the day, you can go to Box Office Mojo and see how much a movie did yesterday in box office reports, and there's just a whole industry around it now. But we'll say 5.2 and call it good from there.
We'll just, yeah. I mean, makes sense.
Again, it was nearly 50 years ago. So inflation and just different time, different era.
Right. Well, and also the fact that you said the rental, though, I think rentals, it probably had way more longevity than it did in theaters.
Right. I was actually reading on Wikipedia, of course, because it just summarizes everything so well. But the movie was initially released in VHS 6 years later in 1979. And my mind was kind of just blown. I'm like, VHS was around in 1979. To me, it was always a very 80s thing, but it had a few more re-releases. But the 1993 VHS release just blew everything out of the water. It was the #1 VHS release in 1993.
Oh, wow.
And I had it. So
I had it too.
I'm pretty sure we have the 1993 version. And I always watched this movie. We had a ton of VHS, but this was one that I grew up with and I would go back to. And I never felt bored by this movie. It's a very straightforward film with straightforward concepts and themes, but because it's not adults that are talking about these big themes of death and friendship, which might lose itself on an audience. Instead, he smartfully changes the characters to something that's a little bit more relatable to children, which is animals. And children are very attracted to animals and relate to animals. And so having these characters that are animals that are able to speak and we're experiencing these major themes through them makes it both relatable to adults and children. So yeah, it's no reason that the book has stood the test of time, but also the movie. I was really surprised watching this, how enjoyable it was. There were pieces that I didn't necessarily love, but we will talk about that.
Yeah. All right, let's watch the trailer.
Very good. Very good.
When animals can talk and a spider can save a pig's life.
If people start doubting the miracle, do you think my life will still be saved?
Most definitely not.
I hate to keep bothering you, but...
You're no bother to me, Wilbur. You are my one true friend.
Isn't it great that I articulate? Isn't it grand that you can understand? I don't grunt, I don't point, I don't even squeak or squawk. When I want to say something, I open up and talk. I can talk, I can talk, I can talk.
I used to think the sum of 1 and 1 was 2.
It's a musical love story the entire family can enjoy together. Don't let your children miss Charlotte's Web.
Aw, thanks.
Is it a love story though? When you think love story, you think romantic love.
Right.
I do, at least. And I think
do too.
This is a love story, but in a totally different way, more platonic. Definitely.
Yeah, very
that
pure.
Was an interesting trailer. That was hilarious.
You could tell it was for the VHS too. It had the VHS in the corner. It's like, oh, that definitely sounded like the VHS guy in the narration too. Like I've heard his voice before.
So one of the first things that really stood out in this movie was the songs. You know, at this point in time, Disney has established the animated feature as having songs, and a lot of studios feel that they have to follow suit, right? And so even though this wasn't necessarily a Disney production, they brought on the Sherman brothers, Richard and Robert Sherman.
No better team.
Write the songs, right? Because at this point, Walt Disney had died, they, while the Sherman brothers were very much Disney's guys, that didn't stop them from doing other features and other very famous pieces of cinema like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. So here they are brought back for quite a few songs. There's There Must Be Something More, I Can Talk, Chin Up, We've Got Lots in Common, Deep in the Dark / Charlotte's Web. Wait, are those like songs?
Yeah.
This is the soundtrack. Deep in the Dark, Charlotte's Web, that's a song?
Well, Charlotte's Web is the
right, but it's not like a lyric. Hold on. The Sherman Brothers wiki. Gotta love those wikis. There were 8 songs that they ended up writing for this movie, which was quite a lot. And
yeah, that's a lot.
One of the first things that I thought as I was rewatching this, there were definitely parts where I really enjoyed the songs and I remembered the songs, and other times that I felt, okay, but do we need a song for that? Why are we doing a song right now? It felt, to be honest, the film is your traditional hour and 30-minute length, but it really did feel like some of the songs were filler just because I gotta sing.
I can talk.
Yeah, and that song
articulate.
Yeah, that song in particular really was very, very indicative of the Sherman brothers. If you look at all of the lyrics, it definitely reminded me of Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. But just all of the various words that he uses is interesting, and it's kind of funny because he's speaking for the very first time in the song, but all of the words that he uses, are very advanced, loquacity, veracity, thematically, perspicacity, egotistically, wondrous. And I mean, that's almost how Charlotte would speak. So I understand what they were trying to do here. Like, why don't we use literally all the words in the thesaurus for speaking? But it just really felt off for the character that he had just learned how to speak, which that was confusing to me.
Yeah.
He was an animal. Like, there's so much to go with. And, we're obviously going to be nitpicking some of the things that we find funny. But he's with Fern the whole time. He really doesn't have any association with animals. And so he's very familiar with the human world. So when he moves over to the Zuckerman's farm, he's never spoken before. But at the same time, we know that he's been making pig sounds.
Yeah.
And so I was just confused. I'm like, what is the distinction here? If you can make pig sounds, then you're speaking. And it is almost as if he needed to learn like the universal language for all the animals, which of course was English. Well, I didn't understand what was going on there. I'm like, why does he have to learn how to speak? Like, it's obvious that he can make pig noises, and he's like, we're not learning English here, because that's what, even in that trailer, it's like talking animals. I'm like, well, they don't talk with the humans, like they talk with each other, which is like very understood in movies and whatnot. But like the animals can understand each other. That's cool. But
the Fern, the child, can understand all of them too.
See, can she though? I always just thought that was just her. Yeah, you're right, because there's very, very specific things that. Oh dear. Yeah, there's very specific plot points that she goes back and she tells her family later. There's a spider named Charlotte. So I kind of in my mind always interpreted that as she had created these stories in her mind. But nope, she definitely understands everything that's going on.
No, she understands. And I think that's kind of to show a little bit of like childhood innocence actually does understand more than the adults. And the adults are the ones that are thinking that you're crazy just because they can't hear it anymore.
Right. And that actually is one of the big themes of the film, is this, which I love the book and the different themes that it's able to convey. And one of them is just innocence. And that's really displayed by Fern, where she's very much a child at the beginning. When it comes to, we have to kill the pig, she just is completely distraught and doesn't understand, why do we have to do this? And he's the dad and the adults, that's just the way. That's, as when you're an adult, you understand that like this is food and this is the purpose of the pig. But she, being a child and being very innocent, gets very upset with the idea of that. But then eventually, as she grows older, she moves on from that. And we see her moving from childlike things to being interested in boys and, not having as much of an attachment to the animals as she's moving on in her life.
Yeah. Well, also for people who've never grown up around farm life or around any type of agriculture, they have a very difficult time understanding what it is to have a farm, and to a farmer will always treat his animals very well, because that is just what they do. They treat their animals very well, but it's also in this case, because it was the runt, their mentality is, I'm not going to be able to get in there and help this pig. And so it's just going to end up dying anyway, because all of the other animals are going to take up all of the space and he'll never be able to fend for itself, really. Mm-hmm. And so in that way, they are seeing that it's a sense of, I'm actually doing
saving
something.
it from pain.
Yeah. So
suffering.
there's the way of like, okay, this pig is going to suffer. It's going to basically starve to death if I don't, because I'm not there to take care of it. So he was like, all right, well, if you can take care of it, then you can take care of it. Go for it.
Because it's funny though. I'm like, you have a runt, but can't you just like give it a little food on the side?
Yeah.
You make money from this animal. So immediately you're just going to chop it up and make some bacon. Like, hello, just give it some food. And then what? You can make however much money down the road because you put a little extra effort into giving it some milk or some food until it was able to fend for itself. It just seemed like very quickly like, oh, we got a runt. Get the axe.
Yeah, and I definitely see that. But it also, you have to look at the farmer's day. Like, how much time does this farmer have in the day? And some farmers are able to do that depending on what their size of their farm is, but some of them aren't. And so it's, it's kind of in their way, I'm looking at the world in a very pragmatic view, but still with mercy in that way. So it's hard. Like, I have to say also that I did not grow up on a working farm, but I did grow up around a lot of animals, and I did grow up with around a lot of farmers. And so I did. I had a Mr. and Mrs. Pig. Mr. Pig, oh, he was funny. Like, my dad, just a side story. My dad is like the most romantic type nice guy you'd probably ever meet. And one day I walk over and I'm like surveying the animals, and we have an additional pig. And I'm like, what? Why do we have another? We had the Mr. Pig, and now we have who is all black, and then the white, this all white pig. I'm like, okay, I didn't just imagine this. Where did this pig come from? And I talked to my dad. I would go over and ask him, I'm like, where did it come from? And he's like, well, Mr. Pig was just such a lonely guy. And so they were trying to get rid of it. And I said, yeah, we need a friend for Mr. Pig. And I was like, aw, good job, Dad. It was just super sweet. But yeah, I mean, looking at it, it's hard if you haven't grown up around like the agriculture way. Don't judge it before you understand it, is my main point. Because it's very easy for somebody who has never been around any of this, has no idea what like daily actions I'm doing to be able to make this all work and to help these animals. Like, it's very easy to just completely come out and judge and be like, cancel culture, right? So it's one of those things, like, before you judge this, like, you have to understand it. So take a minute to understand it.
Nonetheless, Fern has grown up on a farm her entire life.
Yeah, but she's like, how old is she?
Like 8 or 9, isn't she? It's not like she's 3.
No, yeah.
I understand. I mean, what they're trying to do. It was just funny. It was like, I think she's been around this a bit, but nonetheless still sensitive, which is needed.
Well, I mean, around that age is when you become more aware too. Like, when she was 3 or 4, she wasn't aware of all of the ins and outs of what was going on. It was just happening around her too. So she's at the point where she's become aware of her surroundings. She's become aware of all of the injustices in the world, and she's wanting to do her part. So go Fern.
Yeah, the theme of death is something that's very is throughout this film, and we see it in a variety of ways, And so initially we see Fern and her dismay of Wilbur being killed, and then Wilbur likewise very much has this anxiety towards death. He's always kind of thinking about it and fearing it. And then we have Charlotte, who really is just this wise spider who understands the realities of life and has accepted it, and she's really trying to help Wilbur also understand the world, but she's this savior in a way where she's able to help him and do everything that she can to elongate his life. One of the things that we learn in this film is that death is inevitable. It can be prolonged, but it can't be stopped. Mm-hmm. And even Charlotte, in the very end, she, I researched like the different, she's a barn spider. Makes sense. Mm-hmm. And, as common as they live for about a year or 2, and then they mate, they lay their eggs, and they die immediately after. And that is just the way. And she has accepted the realities of life, and she is very graceful about it. And so we see the different perspective of death and what's happening. Even there's just very small ways that death is introduced. There's the rotten egg and how, mm-hmm. That life was never to come to be. And everyone's kind of accepted what's happening there. But Wilbur always is the one who's very frantic about anything that's happening with death and change. Even though change is constant and change is always happening around them, we see the seasons change, and we see, new life is born, and then life ends, and nothing, like it's always this constant flow. He moves from the farmer's house to Zuckerman's house. There's just a lot of change that ends up happening throughout this, which I loved seeing that and having that be displayed like so simply. Very, very simply are these concepts able mm-hmm. to be understood.
Yeah. When I first grew up watching this, I I watched this movie so many times. I realized as I was going back this time, I haven't watched this since I was, at least middle school. Probably prior to that, but if I've watched it since then, I'd be really surprised. Even then, as this movie goes on, there's certain songs that come on that I find myself, I know every single word. It's all filed back there, just like, whoa, this is all there. And I remember I was having this discussion with my uncle not several years ago, but we were just talking about different other childhood movies that we liked, and I brought this one up, and I was just like, it's sad, but it's also just so good. And he actually shed another light on it too that I had never thought about. And then this time going in, that's all I could think about is, as you mentioned, she's a bit of a savior type character. And when you're looking at someone like E.B. White, who grew up, or at least was writing all of these things post World War II, the country, the United States specifically, was very pro-God. And everyone had a basis, not everyone, but the high majority had a Christian Judeo principle base. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't uncommon to see people in their writing about, especially at that time, their writing that kind of has a type of a savior figure or a God, like type of what maybe how God would do things. And it was just so beautiful because as you're watching this, like Charlotte really has nothing to gain by helping Wilbur. Mm-hmm. And at the end, she goes through and she just says, I realize that my life in and of itself, I kill these bugs, and I play my part, because if there weren't spiders, then there would be too many bugs and the bugs would take over the world. So it's a balancing act. But she just has this moment of where she's like, I just wanted to lift my own life by seeing your life lifted as well. And I ugly cried through most of the end of this whole thing.
That's actually a good point, that she normalizes death throughout the film, through her eating the bugs.
Yeah.
He has a really hard time with it initially, and even asks her to eat it, when she's away, or she suggests that, okay, maybe I will eat this when you're gone or when you're sleeping. But throughout the film, we see her catching bugs and eating bugs, which is just the way of life. That is the circle of life, right? And then, and you're saying like she didn't really have a purpose, and Wilbur gave her that. And I think that's where the theme of friendship comes in, and this unlikely friendship between a spider and a pig. She really had no reason to be his friend, except for he needed the friend.
Yeah.
He was inconsolable. He had moved to this new situation and he was trying to make friends. He was really, he's only 2 weeks old, but very much domesticated in a way. And so didn't know necessarily how the farm works and the power dynamics of the different animals.
Right.
You see the sheep who's just like, we are sheep, we deliver the wool, and you're nothing, and just very quickly the system of hierarchy is established, that the pigs are kind of at the bottom along with the rats and the sheep. Let's be real, sheep are not the top of the totem pole as far as the barnyard animals. Like sheep are
definitely
dumb.
The horse.
The horse and the cow, they are up at the top. Okay. So I know you're trying to exert your dominance, but he comes to this totally new world, which he is not familiar with, because he's domesticated in a way. And so he's having to learn how to adapt to this new world. And he thinks like, okay, well, I was friends with a human, so I can easily be friends with all these other people. And it's not allowed per se. And Charlotte, being the most unlikely of them all, befriends him and really consoles him and helps him. So I thought that was very sweet.
Yeah, I read on IMDb that E.B. White was actually super reluctant to have any film version of this book, because especially in an animated film, because he feared that the studios would remove or censor the darker nature side, or for example, let Charlotte survive. She just went away. Instead of, which was something that he was strongly against. And he just really wanted to, the whole basis of the story is trying to help kids deal with issues of loss and grief and death. And just those, like, helping kids normalize it in that way of, like, being like, it's okay. You know, it's part of this bigger plan. And I just felt like that was good. I liked it.
Yeah, I also read that he was very disappointed with what this version of the film was. And
oh, really?
Apparently, it was like, I'm upset that we ended up doing with Hanna-Barbera. There were a few other studios that he really wanted to be the one to do it, and was always kind of calling back to that, and felt that they kind of just ruined the story with unnecessary kind of dopey songs. But however, despite all of that, yes, there are songs, and they are very, like, kiddie in a way. There's a few that are pretty sentimental and real, but I feel that from what I remember of the original book, that a lot of the elements of the book, majority of them are there. Like, it's not tempered down. It's very true to the morals and the themes and the morals and the themes of the book. So, you know, when I think of this film, and when a lot of people think of this film, it's sadness, right? Because it goes there, and it's really able to evoke those emotions from you and tell you these themes. So I really appreciate this film. I mean, you look at it on the surface, like Charlotte's Web, and you think like, oh, kid movie, but it's really a lot deeper than that.
Oh, it's so deep. Well, and then you look at also, when he finally goes to the farm and he meets Charlotte, and then she's decided that she's going to, I decided I'm going to help you, and I am going to, like, there's no need for her to do this, but the fact that she decides to do it, and then overnight she's spinning her web, and then this whole song, I just remember that song being one that I was like, let's fast forward, because it was a minor key, which, you know, always made you a little uneasy. And then also it was really slow, and it was just a lot of like toiling, you know, a lot of like artistic stuff. So as a kid, I was like, fast forward. But this time, as I was going through, I went and I read along with some of the lyrics, and there's one lyric that I think is the crux of the entire story, is involved in one line that says, sometimes when somebody loves you, miracles somehow appear. I felt like that is really what the crux of this movie is, or of the whole story, is through the love of somebody, a completely selfless love towards somebody else, miracles appear. And I was like, that is just so cool.
Let's talk about those miracles.
Okay.
So the miracle ultimately is that to save his life, and she sits and ponders on this for a while, and ultimately comes to, this is what I'm going to do. And she's going to spin a web, and in it, it's going to have a word that describes Wilbur, and people will see it. And over time, in order to keep the attention and to prolong his life, she has to do this numerous times. So the first one is some pig.
Which I was like, okay.
Some pig. I know, it's so funny, but like that's the most memorable out of all of them. Then there's terrific, which obviously you remember because of terrific. That is a quotable quote from this film.
Yeah.
Then there is radiant, and I'm like, okay, sure. Okay. And then the very last one is humble, which humble has two meanings. And so I think it's really funny that Charlotte, like we said before, she should have been the ones singing the phrase or the song, I can talk, because she is this linguist. She has a mastery over the language and is very smart. And
salutations.
But every single time she's like, people, go find me some words. Yeah. Go find me a paper clipping. And I'm like, you very clearly the English dictionary yourself. You are so incredibly smart. And yet they're always on this hunt to find a word that will represent Wilbur. Like, she's never the one really to come up with it, other than good pig, or not some pig.
Yeah.
I just thought that was weird. And also, can we talk? It just never, ever made sense to me. She's the one performing the miracle.
Right.
Yet they always attribute it to the pig. And there's the wife of Zuckerman calls it out at the very beginning. She's like, no, that's an incredible spider. And then Zuckerman's like, no, that's a crazy some pig, and And she loses the argument over that. And then from here on out, it just becomes, wow, look at that fantastic pig. And I'm like, can you guys not see? Pigs don't spin webs. It's not the pig. Yes, the spider is calling out the pig and helping you to focus on that, but we should be focusing on this miraculous spider who can spell and write.
But that's the thing, is like they say that they think that there's no way a spider could, and therefore it's a miracle. And the whole thing, it's like the mystic powers or the mystic things are happening around us. And
what does he say at the very end? Supernatural.
Yes, the supernatural. It's like, okay. But I mean, going back, it's like you think about, you put this on like on a daily, how do I apply this in my daily? Well, every time you see somebody say something nice about somebody else, it shifts the focus onto the person. But at the same time, if you think about it, the person who said the kind thing or the thing that like lifted somebody else, they have to have like that lifts them more than it does the person, but not very many people notice that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I like that. As far as Mrs. Zuckerberg, I'm like, she's being gaslighted. He's like, no, it's not.
She totally is, because they just move on. But I understand they move on very quickly and say it's a miracle, and then all they do is focus on the pig.
Yeah, but I like to think about, this is the moment where it really is short. It showed that this story is not about Wilbur, and it is about Charlotte, and it's about her and her ability to be completely selfless and to lift up others and to give everything that she is to him. Like she goes to the fair. The only thing that she does for herself is to is to eat and lay her eggs. And even then, laying her eggs is not for her. Mm-hmm. It ultimately kills her, and it's not really for her. That is her magnum opus. That is her thing that she's counted every soul, which, takes back to like a God reference. You're looking up like Wilbur is kind of like us, and Charlotte's kind of like the supernatural presence. It's the God presence of, we look up, we depend completely on that power above, and we need to recognize that. But it's the, like, there's just so many parts. When I first went in and watched this completely from that angle, like, oh, it killed me. I have honestly ugly cry for like 15 minutes. But I just loved it because I had never really thought about it as a kid, as this is not a story about Wilbur. This is a story about Charlotte.
One of the things that stood out to me in this film was the voice acting. I feel that the voice acting and the performances are very, very strong.
Very strong.
Wilbur is very emotive and has a very distinct voice, and he expresses, the depths of his soul and anxiety and sadness and then happiness. And he's kind of all over the place as far as his dynamic range. And then Charlotte is just this soothing presence. As soon as I heard her voice, I was like, I remember you. You are a calming, happy spider, existence. Yeah. And I really enjoyed the different performances from a variety of the characters. So I really liked that.
Yeah, if you look at, so the first one is Debbie Reynolds. She did the voice of Charlotte, which, rip Debbie Reynolds. Her acting voice is just, it's so full of life. And that is really indicative of the time too, of the classical training that they had. I also read on IMDb that she donated this. Like, she didn't charge because she wanted to be Charlotte.
Oh, wow.
And I just thought, wow. So did you ever see the live action version that came out a couple years ago? Well,
I did not.
I didn't either. It was 2006, and Julia Roberts played Charlotte. And I just was as I listened to the trailer of it, Julia Roberts, I mean, I respect the lady, but she didn't have the same amount of love that exuded from her performance in the trailer that I expected from this Debbie Reynolds performance. Because like every word that Charlotte said in the 1973 with Debbie Reynolds, it was just like you could just feel the care. You could feel the love that exudes. And for the other ones, I don't know. I felt like it was let's see how much we can do with with technical aspects. Let's focus on the technical side, as opposed to like the simplicity of the story is all about like these basic principles.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I have no interest in seeing the newer one. I feel like this one's so classic. And of course, you always say that about the original or the one that you grew up with. It's not necessarily the original. It really is the one you grew up with is the one that you love a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So that's probably, I don't know, maybe one of these days I don't know. That's not really considered, that's live action. So occasionally from time to time, guys, we will review live action films on this podcast. If it's, related to an animated film, it's like a live action remake, we will do those. But sometimes we'll just review live action films for our patrons that have nothing to do with animation, just because. So another
just because
reason,
we like them.
I mean, I've been really trying to get a Twilight rewatch going, and I know that's going to get all the potential patrons coming in droves. Oh my gosh, they're going to do Twilight. Yes, sign me up. I realize that may not be the case, but I've been trying to be like, I've done the rewatch and I want to do it again. And yes, a few of the patrons are interested, so I'm like,
yeah, we had at least one.
I mean, yeah, so one. Yeah, that's green light it. Let's go.
The thing is, we would have done this without the one.
But we probably should maybe do one that has more universal appeal to the patrons, since they are supporting us.
Right, for sure.
But anyway.
Okay. I also want to bring up Paul Lynde, who did the voice of Templeton. I love his voice. And apparently they had somebody else doing it before, and his voice was a lot more like when he did the Fair song, his voice was a lot more operatic, and like his voice just was a lot less scummy. Like Templeton, like Paul Lynde, I love the man, but his voice just really does have a real like egotistical way about it. Like, and I'm just like, you totally fit this part. Good job, man.
Yeah, he's definitely the seedy underbelly of the farm. He lives underneath the pig's trough. And while a lot of these characters some characters have an arc, he really doesn't. I was thinking about him.
No.
And Templeton, even at the very, very end, when just Wilbur is beside himself and they need to get the spider egg sac moved back to the farm, and Templeton, who'd been friends with Charlotte, or an acquaintance at least, he was very familiar with her, and you think he'd created this bond, especially with Wilbur, getting all the food and whatnot. But even he was, not this altruistic guy at the end. He had to say, well, what's in it for me? Like very true to character through the end. There was no moment where he's like, yes, I'll do this for you. Or I'll do this for Charlotte. It was, well, what can I get out of this? And so he does this like crazy negotiation that he gets first dibs of all the food from here until the rest of eternity. I'm like, I don't know about that, but it was just interesting how he didn't grow at all. He was always one note. The only, I guess, change that he had is he had a family.
Which even that was like, what the?
Yeah, I know. It was like, well, everyone's got to procreate, so why not you? So we see this lady friend appear. And that's one thing they don't actually talk about with Charlotte. Like, well, who was the guy? That would have created too many questions. So she just appears with the eggs at the end and then quickly dies and, basically rips our heart in half. So
yeah, right.
There we go.
Yeah. I mean, like Paul, like that character, I feel like is really used to show the difference between somebody who is altruistic and somebody who is all out for themselves. And for kids, like you want to kind of have that be some type of a juxtaposition, like to be able to show that at all times. There is, even when somebody is like that, there's still going to be people who are rats in the end.
Yep. Yeah. And you still love them because, They're part of your barnyard family. With Wilbur, I thought it was interesting because he changes to an extent, but he doesn't. Like, he's still very much emotional, kind of a baby. When he finds out that Charlotte is dying, it's almost the same reaction that he had at the very beginning when he found out he was dying. It's that his acceptance of death really hadn't come too far.
I mean, how accepting are any of us?
I know. It's true when you find out a friend dies, but
we know. I mean, there's the theory of it. When you hear about death, there's a theory, but actually to have something like that happen, like it's as if we never knew it existed.
Yeah, totally.
But I do agree though that he doesn't change very much. He is a very straight character. But I do think that he did change in the way of like at the end where he is super depressed and waiting for the eggs to hatch. And then he's even worse off when all of them are leaving and is like, oh no.
I thought this was gonna, like, he thought that he had like bought himself instant friends. Not that he paid for anything, but he thought, okay, well, one friend died, but like, I will for sure have all these brand new friends to make up.
There's
for Charlotte.
514 here. It's okay.
Right. At least one of them. And again, change and kind of the way of life is they quickly hatch and move on. They know their purpose in life, and they do their little floating little threads, and they float away and they say, bye, bye, bye. And there's no remorse. There's no attachment to him. They just know what their life's purpose is. And that is to go and find other places to populate and to become spiders. So
I think it's interesting how a lot of the characters in this are focused on the quote runt of the litter. So you have like, it's always looking at the least of these in that way, the people who are lowest on the totem pole. And even at the very end, when you have the 3 little spiders that stay behind, the only reason they stay behind is because they were too small to leave. And so they're like, okay, and I'll just stay here, I guess. And so all of his friends and all of the people that he ends up associating with are just kind of like default. Like they didn't choose to stay there. It just happened to be. And so they're just working with what they got. I don't know. He was the runt, but through Charlotte, he was seen as more. And then he is able to now live a life because of that. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, he becomes the Charlotte figure in the end to the little runts. He's... it's interesting that he takes on that role. He becomes he copies even her words.
Yeah.
So it was just funny.
I loved it.
I thought it was hilarious when he was like, do you know how to write? And they're like, no. And then he says, it's like, okay, well, when you learn, this is what you're going to say. And it's this giant novel. Here was the place of Charlotte. It was just hilarious to me. And they're like, that would take a lifetime.
But I mean, even looking at his response to that, he's like, well, that's what we have. And like... taking a lifetime to honor someone else, like, wow.
Right.
That's super deep.
And they go to say that, they never did replace Charlotte, and that he never had the bond with them that he did Charlotte. And I think that is true. And I think that was important to call out because friends, you can't, replace a child who has died or has been lost, or a friend or a family member. You, as much as you want to try to replace them in your life, nothing will replace them.
Right.
And I think that was important to call out because friends and people aren't replaceable. They're not just something that you can swap out and move on. And I know cloning is a big thing, or becoming a big thing for like animals and pets. Like, people want to hold on to what they had, but that's just not life. Death is a natural part of it. And we need to respect and honor the lives that people have lived and remember them. And, that's why he really wants to kind of like have this almost like a plaque over the, over the barn with remembering her and everything that she did. But in the end, life goes on. And I thought it was really funny at the the last line of the movie was essentially like, and there never was a greater friend. Oh, here we go. And I think this is actually from the book. Wilbur never forgot Charlotte. Although he loved her children and grandchildren dearly, none of the new spiders ever quite took her place in his heart. She was in a class by herself. It is not often that someone comes along who is a true friend and a good writer. Charlotte was both. So initially, when you hear that ending phrase, you could, depending on the mood you're in, you could almost laugh, right? You think,
oh yeah,
here she is. She's a true friend and a good writer, and she was both. Yeah, that doesn't happen every day. But I think they're actually pretty powerful because this story isn't necessarily just about friendship and how important that is, but it also very clearly lets us know the difference and the power that words have on people's lives.
Yeah.
So not only, and Charlotte was able to convey, and save his life through the words that she was able to spin in her web. But also the words that she was able to say to him, and their friendship was more than just her doing these acts of kindness for him. She truly was a friend. So I think that really is powerful way to end it. Like, obviously, like I snickered a little bit being like snarky as I am, like good writer and a great friend. But that it really, really is true that the words that we say can impact and change someone's life for the better. And the words that we write. And that's even so much more important in today's time of social media and where people just hide behind their computer screens and they think they can say whatever they want. And they don't realize that there is an actual person on the other end whose words are real.
Yeah.
And they affect how people feel.
When that's the only thing you see too.
Right. Exactly. So, words in that case are even more powerful. And so we need to be very conscious in how we use our words, and we should be more like Charlotte in trying to uplift others and using our words, especially if we have a gift for words, for good.
I totally agree. And like, I've seen that even recently. I mean, you're just, if you're on social media at all right now, especially in the United States, it's a political year. And so you have everything is politically charged and people feel like it's somehow okay to throw like just really bad-natured words at people. I think it's a lot more relatable to us in our generation than I think any other generation, interestingly enough, just because it's like, how do we talk to each other? Right. I had a moment where I said, okay, how am I doing this? And I wanted to like set myself at a higher standard too. It's like, okay, I want to be able to say that what I am writing is going to be uplifting and it's not going to be destroying. It's going to be something that like my words laced in love and hope or malice and revenge. And there's a lot of the latter going around, but I feel like this is the time when like we all just need to hold ourselves to a little bit of a higher standard and just be like, this is what I'm going to be focusing on. Because in the end, like, why does this story stay within our hearts? It's because it does focus on the good and it does focus on real things and the story, that power of love, the power of friendship. When somebody loves you, miracles happen. It's like if we focus more on that, then like attracts like. And so that's what, if you're focusing on the other, you're going to get more of that in your life. You're just going to. And that was just something that came to me too. I do have to say though, as a caveat to that, if you are in an abusive relationship or a dangerous situation, get out. Like, this is not something to be like, oh, I'm going to nice my way out of this. Like, no, you need to just get out and walk away from something that is in any way dangerous or abusive. So, and that was another line too, that in the very beginning, he's like, oh, you're beautiful. She's like, well, I am pretty. And I was like, Charlotte has a lot of like, she knows who she is. She's like,
confidence.
Well, yeah, that confidence. Like, we need to have that confidence and to be able to say, this is what I deserve. This is the type of treatment that I deserve, and not settle for anything less, but also do it with love.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I got a lot out of this for me, and I don't want to like come across as like a preachy episode at all, but But these are just the things that I got out of it. Oh, like I said, I ugly cried. It got me.
There were moments when I was thinking, I didn't cry, but there were moments when I would think about something. Like when I realized, oh yeah, Charlotte dies, I got like, I started to feel like I was getting ready to tear up. This was very early on because it's just been so long. I've just been so far removed. Like obviously anyone who's read the book or watched the movie knows that's what happens, but I just kind of forgot it. And as soon as I was like, oh yeah, that's where we're going, I started to get really sad. And that's this very emotional film. And it just has these themes and it very simply presents these, darker themes, but not necessarily dark. I mean, it's neutral. Like death is neutral. It just, it is what it is. And, I asked the patrons, I said, thoughts on Charlotte's Web? Again, another riveting question from me, but the patrons very much
thought-provoking. Good job.
Yes, they had the same sentiment. Rebecca said, I loved it. I think I saw this movie before ever getting introduced to the book. I remember it as sort of moody and whimsical. I think it captures the sadness of the story in a very beautiful way. Alex Beavis says, I loved the movie as a kid. I loved the songs and thought the characters were engaging. Several heartfelt moments, such as when the girl has to give Wilbur away. Overall, huge thumbs up for the movie. Joseph Areola says, I don't remember much of the songs. I'll need to listen to them again. Charlotte was an adorable spider. And then the very last one, which is so true. Daniel Talbert says, never again, too many tears over a spider. And that is so true. So true. We've become very attached to her.
Yeah.
And just, the way that she accepts her fate and she moves on and death happens like very quickly. It's emotional. It's sad. And we obviously see it through Wilbur's reaction, but we too are attached to her. So
yeah.
Oh, Charlotte.
Well, I mean, our podcast is not a religious podcast, guys. I just want to put that out there. But because of my background, this is the paradigm that I look at things and the things that stand out to me and really get me. And so I am sharing them only to share in a way of saying, this is why I love this film. One point, right when Wilbur's looking up, they're at the fair and he looks up and he's like, what are you doing, Charlotte? And the whole dialogue back and forth almost came across because I had already had it in my mind that this was kind of like a God situation, that it kind of seemed like an evening prayer. And because right now, like with the society and everything just crazy, sometimes I feel like looking up and saying like, God, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? And Charlotte says, oh, making something as usual. Wilbur really wants Charlotte to tell him. And she just says, well, I'll tell you in the morning. When the first light comes into the sky and the sparrows stir and the cows rattle their chains, when the rooster crows and the stars fade, when the early cars whisper along the highway, you look up here and I'll show you something. I will show you my masterpiece. And I just felt like that was just it was just so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How very special are we for just a moment to be part of life's eternal rhyme. How very special are we to have on our family tree Mother Earth and Father Time.
What would you rate it?
I have to give this a 5-star. I mean, I do. It's just because it was so after it takes a couple watches in order to get all that is in this out of it. I think because I probably wouldn't have counted this before I made different different ties to it. I probably would have given it as far like of maybe 4.5 in there, but just because of how it hit me when I was watching it this time, I feel like I have to give it a 5.
Okay. I'm going to give this 4.5 stars. I really was moved by the story and obviously the source material. And this is, I mean, there are sections of the movie that are word for word from the book. And I think they stayed very true to the source material while having to, adapt it for a visual audience. And they did a really, really great job. The animation itself is not the most beautiful thing you've ever seen in the world. You know, the backgrounds, I think during that very opening scene where it's like the title sequence, there's no animation. It's just kind of like panning across backgrounds with like some effects here and there. So it's, again, Hanna-Barbera, they were from the TV world of fast production where, you have the constant walk cycles and all they would do was animate the head, and very cheap animation because they had to quickly use these tricks and cheats, I guess, to cut the costs. And so, this is definitely elevated from their TV productions because they have a bigger budget, whatever that may be. The world will never know. But nonetheless, it is not distracting, and it's really good. The animation is decent as far as the character animation, but really does and sells this is the story, which we've talked about, the themes, to most of the extent, the songs and the score, and the voice acting. Those things together really form this powerful film that has resonated and left a lasting impact on many people's lives. So for that reason, I'm going to give it 4.5 stars.
All right. So we do have some voicemails. Let's start with Esther.
Hey, Rotoscopers, it's Esther here. I hope that the three of you are all doing well. I realized that there are 2 animated films I wanted to suggest for you to do in the future. So one of them is Batman, Mask of the Phantasm.
Ooh.
Now, when I was growing up, I remember that Batman the Animated Series was on television, and I didn't watch it all the time constantly, but I would say it probably was the animated show that had the biggest impact on me. And it made me realize that animation it didn't have to be silly all the time. It could be theatrical. It could be tragic, powerful, moving. So I really liked the Mask of the Phantasm film. That was a sort of a tribute to the animated series. And the other is Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky. That's a classic, iconic 80s fantasy film. It has that element of flight in it. And it also has Mark Hamill voicing the villain. So that's awesome.
Mark Hamill.
And hope you get to watch those both and enjoy them. Thanks.
I agree that those are ones that we should look at.
Yeah, first off, I love hearing Esther's voice. Esther has been a longtime fan and listener of the podcast and a new patron. Woo. And so I just love hearing your voice because when you call in, I don't know, I feel it, and you call in over and over and over again over the years, you have this deeper connection with the listeners because the voice is so strong, and so thank you. So thank you, Esther. And yes, those are fantastic. I really think that we should do Mask of the Phantasm sooner rather than later. Over the years, people had always been mentioning, this movie, and it never was on my radar growing up. Like Esther, the Batman 90s franchise was very much a part of my life and something that was, very strong and something that I watched. And so I'm not sure how I missed it, but when I finally sat down and watched it, I was just so amazed of how good it actually is. So I think that is an incredible suggestion, and I think we should add it to our list.
Definitely.
I think we should do it next episode.
Do we think that we'll be able to get him back?
I don't know.
We shall see. I mean, I would love to have Mason on that one. That seems like one that
might as well.
he would add a lot to it. We will see if he's available. All right. And this one is from Chad.
Howdy, Rotoscopers. Chad here, sending in a voicemail for your watch of Charlotte's Web. I was really delighted that you guys were going to do this one, and I cannot wait to hear what you think of it. I did rewatch this in preparation for your review, and I don't know about you, but even with my nostalgia glasses on, I think it holds up wonderfully. I think the animation is cute. I think the voice acting is superb. I think the songs are catchy. And it still moves me. I mean, I still cry when Charlotte dies. One thing I did want to point out was when I rewatched this, I was honestly surprised that I didn't realize who was in the voice cast. You've got Agnes Moorehead playing the goose, aka Andorra from Bewitched, and when I was growing up, I was a huge fan of Bewitched. But I was amazed to see that Agnes was in it. The guy who also played Uncle Arthur in Bewitched does the rat. I cannot think of his name for some reason. And Debbie Reynolds was Charlotte. That just makes it even more compelling. But yeah, it was honestly fun going back and watching this film and kind of learning a bit more about who was in the cast. And like I said, I still think it holds up. It's very, very sweet, and will definitely be one that I keep in my collection and probably watch when I'm 95 years old. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Like I said before, I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Later.
Thank you so much, Chad. Yeah, it's actually interesting. The voice cast, we talked about a few of the characters, but he mentions from Bewitched, 5 members of the cast were from the Bewitched cast.
That's so straight. Like
very iconic. Yeah.
I'm not strange, but it's like, is that random? Is that just because somebody really likes that show?
Time.
Yes.
Well, it did end in 1972, so they needed work.
Yeah. They're like, anything, sure. But that's oh man. No, I really liked the goose is one of my favorite characters. Like, I probably could. Oh, you better get it. It's just, I loved it.
Yeah.
And her outlook on life is like, it was not luck, it was hard work. As far as her, like, there's no luck about it.
Yes, she was a great character. Although I was thinking this, when they all go to have their swimming lesson and the runt doesn't want to join, I'm like, I think it's really important as a goose that he learns how to swim. Right. Mom, you need to be the mom here and force him to go. But maybe he's one of those kids where it's like, I know you've only been hatched like 3 minutes, but you are a handful. So sure, you want to babysit?
I've already got 6 others here to deal with. Well, this also coming from you who had both of your kids swimming at like 6 months old or something like that. How old was it?
Basically like 9 months.
Yeah.
That's floating. Cool. They know how to float and roll over and swim to the wall. So
these are
safety skills.
These are necessary for sure. Awesome. Thank you so much, Chad. Also, Chad, your voice, awesome. It's very soothing to listen to. I was like, what a soothing voice. Just going to throw it out there. All right. Any other voicemails? Any other things?
Nope. We'll wrap it up.
Cool. Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us this week on our episode for Charlotte's Web. We love throwing on the nostalgia glasses. We do that on occasion whenever we need a pick-me-up. And this one definitely was what I needed this week too. So I'm glad that we did it. Whoop, whoop. We have made the executive decision. We are going to do Mask of the Phantasm next. All of our Batman fans rejoice. Woo! And whoop. Mark Hamill for the win. Woo! So I'm very excited to be jumping in on that. And because, I saw this at least 5 years ago, probably for the first time. And so I was very impressed too. So I'm excited to jump back in and watch it again.
Yeah, so be sure to send in your voicemails for that. Also, we still are collecting voicemails for Toy Story 4 and Sailor Moon Rewatch coming down, hopefully sometime soon in the near future. Fingers crossed we can get Mason back for the next episode. But until next time, we are the Rotoscopers. Speaking of pig films, that'll do, pig.
That'll do, pig. We are the Rotoscopers. Let's try that. That was probably the worst time we've done it, ever.
Ever, yeah.